Premiere Pro opened on this PC. You can see we have our playback resolution as full. We're gonna scrub the timeline, let it play so you guys can see that it's doing a great job with this 4K footage. Hey everyone, Digital David here. Today on this episode of Newegg Now, we're going to be benchmarking our brand new PC build. Shout out to Cooler Master for hooking us up with some great parts and components. And shout out to Newegg for sponsoring today's video. If you're interested in any of the parts and components you see here, the link to the build will be in the video description. Everything turned out great. First, let's go over the parts and components. Then let's go ahead, let's look at the build up close. So here's a quick look at all the parts and components for this build that can be found on Newegg. So first up, you can see I decided to add an additional fan to this build, and I chose the Cooler Master Master Fan SF120M. It's an ARGB 120mm fan. I've used them a lot in previous builds, so I wanted to make sure I had a nice exhaust fan to use to pair with the 3 fans that are included with our case. Next up, you can see we're using the Asus Prime B660 Plus Intel LGA 1700 motherboard. This is for the new 12th gen CPUs. It has PCIe 4.0. That is all that I was after. The bonus is we have multiple M.2 slots if I ever want to add additional storage, even though I have a dedicated server for that. And we have 2.5 gig LAN. Then you can see we're using 32 gigs of the Lexar Hades RGB RAM. I have linked to 16 gigabytes, but if you wanted to have 32 or more, you'd have to order additional quantities. Next, we have the Samsung 980 Pro M.2 drive, 1 terabyte version, but they have multiple sizes and capacities available. Then to cool everything, we're using the Cooler Master Master Liquid ML240 Illusion. They have this in white and black. We're using the black version for our build. Keep in mind, you will have to pair this with Cooler Master's LGA 1700 mounting bracket. You can get that for just a couple additional dollars. It's like $6 or $7. You will have to get that to use it with the new 12th gen CPUs. Powering everything is the Cooler Master. You can see it's the MW Gold 1250 watt power supply. This is overkill for our needs. So depending on your build, they have smaller wattage options available, and that's what I would recommend unless you're gonna be using some super power hungry GPUs, multiple GPUs, that sort of thing. For us, we're using the EVGA RTX 3060. This is the cheapest one I could find right now. Really painful still to try to buy a GPU at the moment. Our case is the Cooler Master Master Box. This is the TD500 mesh. So we have a beautiful tempered glass panel. And then we have that mesh front panel, which looks really cool with our polygonal designs. And it's just really nice with those 3 fans on it. And then lastly, our CPU is the Intel Core i7-12700K CPU that does have integrated graphics if you want to hold off on a GPU for now. And this features 12 cores. We have 8 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. Now let's go ahead, let's get it built. All right, so check it out. You can see we have our completed PC right here. The build turned out great. No issues at all whatsoever. Posted on the first try. Really happy with how everything came together. Now let's go ahead, let's look at the build in more detail. So first up, you can see everything from the top right here. We have our USB 3.0 ports, our nice illuminated power button, and then we have our headphone jack, mic jack, and you can see we have our reset switch right here programmed with the included controller, so we can actually configure and change our RGB lights directly from the top of the case. No additional software needed, which is really, really cool. We can also remove this cover, and you can see how we have our radiator mounted. Plenty of room if we wanted to get an even larger radiator in there. And then this just snaps right back on and in place. And we have a nice little glow you can see a little bit up top from our fans, giving us a little bit of RGB illumination. Now you can see the backside of our PC right here. We have our power supply at the bottom with our power cable plugged in, our GPU right here. You can see the additional exhaust fan that we installed with this build, and it looks cool too because you can see some of the RGB glow out back. And then we have our I/O shield and our motherboard ports and I/O right there. Keep in mind, when you buy cheaper motherboards, typically you have less ports and options there. I felt like this one struck a good balance for what I needed, and I don't really need any USB ports or anything like that, so really happy with the options that we get right there. But obviously no Wi-Fi either, just 2.5 gig LAN, which is really nice. Now we're looking at what has to be my favorite part of this build, the front panel. Check it out. We have our 3 fans, beautiful RGB, really bright, nice and lit up with the really cool polygonal mesh right here. So really happy with how that looks. The aesthetic is top notch, and then we can just configure the lighting to whatever our mood is. And it's just really cool. Whatever angle you're looking at this PC from, especially from the front, you'll be really happy with how everything will come together with your build and how you can configure and customize the RGB to your preferences. So now you can see everything from the side right here. It really came together nicely. Plenty of room to route and manage our cables properly from the side or down below and up through the shroud. We have our visible power supply cover right here. I like that we can see in there, especially if you get a fancy one with some RGB or maybe a screen on it. But we have a nice shroud to still keep it quiet, cool, and separate from our build. Plenty of room on the side for additional expansion or maybe some custom water cooling. You can see the additional fan we added for an exhaust fan here. And check out the glow from our cooler, top notch. The fans look so nice and the cooler illuminates as well too. You may notice the RAM is not synced up with the rest of the fans. That's because that's being controlled by the motherboard, whereas everything else is being controlled by the controller and the case itself, because that's how we set it up. So if we wanted this to match, we would have to configure that separately within our motherboard light settings, which the Asus Aura light is a great option, so we wouldn't have any issues there changing it to a blue or rainbow or whatever we wanted to match maybe the theme of the rest of the build. Also want to point out at this step, while we're looking at everything, if you are going to buy some RAM, you might want to get some low profile RAM depending on the size of the cooler you're going to use. Space is definitely a delicacy at the top here, so everything works great, but if we wanted to remove the RAM or upgrade the RAM right now, we'd actually have to take off the radiator. Not that big of a deal, but just keep that in mind. You could get some lower profile RAM. But again, plenty of room if you want a larger graphics card, additional expansion. We can still get to some of our M.2 bays right here too. So really have plenty of room to grow into this build. Now it's time for our handheld camera here, going up close and personal to our build. So first up, we have our HD audio connected down there. Moving along the board, you can see we have our fan connected and we have our front panel connected. They even label everything for you right there. Then we have our USB 3.0 connected, and keep in mind we do have an unused USB Type-C connector. Then you can see we have our main power. Moving along, we have our beautiful radiator. Look at how cool that is with our awesome illuminated pump housing that matches. We have our CPU power connected up there. And then those two cables coming down here that need to be tidied up are our CPU fan and our AIO pump. They are connected off to the side. Also, you may see we have our M.2 drive under there, PCIe 4.0, and we have our RTX 3060 with no RGB with our power cable coming out right there. Our additional fan that was not included that we got to use as an exhaust that matches and pairs really nicely with our cooler. And then you can see this side, if you want, of that front panel and those 3 fans. And there is our power supply shroud up close with this nice slot cut out for it. So check it out. Everything looks great. Beautiful RGBs in this build with plenty of additional space depending on future expansion. So first up, we're going to be checking out the SSD speeds. So first thing I want to point out is we have a 1 terabyte drive. Usable space, you can see on the PC, 930 gigabytes usable out of the 1 terabyte. And Samsung advertises this drive as having max read speeds at up to 7,000 megabytes per second and max write speeds up to 5,000 megabytes per second. I conducted 2 benchmarking tests. First up with Crystal Disk Mark, you can see the results very close to what Samsung advertises. We got a score of 6,633 megabytes per second for our read speed, and we got a score of 4,962 megabytes per second for our write speed. Now, typically with these tests, AS SSD always comes in lower, and you can see the results that we got here. So for our read speeds, we got 4,938 megabytes per second, and for our write speeds, we got 3,760 megabytes per second. But with that being said, you can see we get very fast speeds and performance with this drive. So make sure whatever drive you end up going with, I'd highly recommend making sure that your motherboard and your M.2 drive are compatible with PCIe 4.0. It is definitely a worthwhile upgrade to your SSD speeds. Next up, you can see on the screen, we got CPU Z results right here. So first up, I'm gonna click through the tabs and you guys can pause the video at any time if you wanna see any of the information on our build and our CPU right here. So we'll just click through them. You can learn more about the memory and the motherboard. You can see the graphics we're using. Here's our bench results. So we did a single thread test and you can see our score there. And we did a multi-thread test and you can see our score as well. And now we're on their page comparing our results with other comparable CPUs. So first up with the multi-thread score, check it out. You can see we're just the 4th CPU from the top and we're competing with other variants of the 12700. And then we have that jump up to the 12900K right here. But honestly, price to performance wise, the 12700 is a much better value, at least for the multi-thread you can see, but it holds true for the single thread as well. So check that out. We're only 2 from the top. And again, we're just competing with the 12900K at that point. And you can see down below, we have some of our competition with the Ryzen 9 5900X. And you can see how that stacks up against the competition. But as you can tell, it's definitely a top performing CPU and the price of performance is there, especially comparing it to the cost of the 12900K. Next up, you can see our Geekbench 5 results right here. So our score was 97.91.4 and they have a nice breakdown of our system information. And then you can see our performance score breakdown as well with all the individual metrics to give us our OpenCL score of 97.91.4. Next up, you can see our Cinebench R23 results on the screen right here. So first up, we got a multi-core score of 21.77.6. And we have a nice breakdown here with some other comparable CPUs. And then you can see we got a single core score of 19.06. Let's go ahead, let's pull up those results. And again, you can see how it compares to some of the competition. Next up, let's talk about thermals. So currently you can see our CPU temp is 23 degrees Celsius. We don't have any load. The PC is just idling and it's nice and cool as you would expect. But with that being said, when we put this under full load, we peaked at 86 degrees Celsius just for a second as it initially boosted and pushed our CPU to 100%. Then it dipped down and held steady for a while at 82, 83 degrees Celsius. Then we held steady at 75 degrees Celsius. And occasionally we peaked back up to that 82, 83 degrees Celsius range. But again, that's at full maximum load and stress on our CPU. So overall, the thermals are great. No issues at all there. We have plenty of nice, cool airflow in our build. And whether we're idling or at 100%, we're not gonna have any heating issues with this case. Next up, you can see we have Premiere Pro opened on this PC with a 4K video project that's 17 minutes long. You can see we have our playback resolution as full. We're gonna scrub the timeline, let it play so you guys can see that it's doing a great job with this 4K footage. So check it out right there. No issues at all. It's playing back the video just fine. And then you can see we can scrub further along. And you can see once we play again that we're not having any issues at all with our timeline, which is great. And we'll go one more spot. Look at that, super responsive. Now let's go ahead, let's export the video and see how it does with the encoding process. All right, so we just started encoding the video. You can see it's been 50 some odd seconds that it's been encoding and we only have an additional 4 minutes, so 5 minutes total to encode and export our 4K 17-minute video. And you may notice too, we have Task Manager up on the screen. So our CPU is currently at around 30%, our memory's at close to 60%, and you can see a lot of this is falling on our GPU at around 80%. But it's doing a great job to edit with 4K video, your high resolutions, and it's given us fast encoding and exporting speeds. Anytime, at least for me, that it takes less than half the time of the video, I'm really happy with the result. In this case, we're even less than that. So the 12700K with our RTX 3060, and I would say it's important too that we have that really fast M.2 drive from Samsung, really is a nice pair giving us great video performance. So while this PC is mostly going to be used for video editing, don't forget about gaming. You can't sleep on this build. So we got the Intel 12700K that's going to be fantastic for gaming, paired nicely with our RTX 3060. If we want to do any 1080 or 1440p gaming, we will enjoy the experience that we get with this PC. And don't forget, since we built it ourselves, depending on our budget or maybe how our hobbies or passions grow and change, we could always put and upgrade this PC, especially with another GPU like an RTX 3080, to even give us better editing performance and substantially better gaming performance if you want to bump up, maybe it's to some 4K resolution, or you really want those high FPS values. You will appreciate gaming, content creating, filming, editing, streaming, whatever you want to do with a PC like this. Well, that concludes our video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget the product link will be in our video description below. Please go ahead, check it out, and do your shopping from there. Any purchase made through that link helps support our channel at no additional cost to you. So we're really grateful and thankful for all of your support. While you're at it, can you go ahead and hit that like button for us? And subscribe to our channel. We have new content coming out daily, and we don't want you to miss anything. Please go ahead and give us a follow online and make it a clean sweep. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, TikTok, Discord. You can message us on WeChat, check out our website, and join our free newsletter. Thank you guys so much for being here. Don't forget, new content daily, and we can't wait to see you in our next video.